The way I look at this is, if I'm designing and constructing a rocket to go to outer space, I need to hire rocket scientists. I need certain skill sets and talents around that. If you don't, you're going to be quite unsuccessful. But when it comes to like internal audit, and what I've always found is character is so important.
This episode is brought to you by Green Skies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Green Skies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Green Skies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell, and today on the show, we have Scott Madenburg. He's a former chief audit executive with 20 plus years of experience in the audit profession. He was previously the market advisor with Audit Board and is currently the founder at Arc Hybrid. Scott's going to speak a little bit more about what he's doing at Arc Hybrid, so I'll let him do that. But some of the areas that we hit on, and probably one of the more important ones, we all hear this goal or initiative to get a seat at the table, and it can be tough to break through and really do that. And so Scott walks us through how we can do that, how we can break through to engage with our stakeholders, as well as recruiting and retention is still a huge issue for a lot of executives, not only CAEs. So Scott goes into detail on how to fix that issue for folks, as well as some of the other major issues that CAEs are dealing with right now. And then to kind of close things out, we talk about if Scott were to build an internal audit department from scratch, what that would look like. All right, here we go. All right, so I know you got back from the trip from Germany, so you probably had some searches in your browser, your internet browser, or ChatGPT from back then related to your trip there, which is super interesting. But what about recently, as of late? What's in your browsing history? What's in your ChatGPT history?
Yeah, great question. So three things are actually within there right now. And part of that is photography. I've always dabbled in photography, but I've actually, due to my daughter's, she's in sports, and I've been doing a lot more sports photography around that. But also due to some trips I've taken recently, I've just been getting more and more into some landscape and so forth. So I've been doing a lot of more searching on educating myself on things like Photoshop and Lightroom, but also just different aspects and really reading up on what other people are doing, and just I'm trying to find my own niche within it, but also certain things that, I didn't think about doing a setting like this or setting exposure like that. And it's just kind of fun to educate myself on that. And another thing is, just talking about, and I'll talk about my daughter a lot. She's a big inspiration to me. But she's a freshman right now. She is on the varsity lacrosse team as a goalie. Never really knew much about lacrosse until she started playing. So I'm actually trying to understand it better and so forth. It's an exciting game to watch, but trying to understand the rules, tips and tricks I can do to help her. But also too is, as I mentioned, I'm a team photographer. So I'm also just trying to get better at that. And the last thing is we're planning a road trip along the California coast this summer. Again, for my daughter, because she's going to be doing a 10-day law program at Stanford. So we're going to drive up the coast and just trying to plan some of those things along the trip. And we've done it before, but I'm just looking for new and different things. But Also, now that I'm back into the photography, where might want to stop is take some fun shots.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. That would be nice. I mean, we try to travel as much as possible, and it's just iPhone and take a picture real quick, and then a year later it shows up on, my Google Memories or whatever, and I go, oh yeah, that was cool. That's the extent of my photography. And then, so your lacrosse is my soccer. So I'm never shy about talking about my son either, who's 5. Most sessions that I do, like if I speak publicly, there's usually a slide where I throw him in there somehow, and I do not apologize about it at all. But anyway, so he's, baseball, basketball, football, soccer. And so for football, I'm like, hey, man, put your foot in the dirt, turn this way. This is how you run this route. This is how you hold the ball, catch it like this, basketball, hold your follow through, make sure you box out, even at 5 years old. Like I can coach him through that. Last night we were playing baseball in his room. My wife doesn't listen to the podcast, so she doesn't know that. It's like elbow up. That's the only, I know you got to keep your elbow up. Then he started soccer, and I went, dude, I have no idea how to do this sport. And so I just looked at one of the dads. I was like, you know how this sport works? And he went, yeah. I was like, how do you dribble the ball down the field? And he told me. So soccer has been in mind a little bit, at least just to learn the rules and be able to understand it somewhat.
Yeah. My daughter plays soccer as well, so she's been doing that for several years. But lacrosse is new to her. And then this year she also picked up flag football.
Oh, nice. That's right.
It's a big one now amongst the girls, and that's just another fun. I've always been familiar with U.S. football, but I'm not sure if you've ever really watched flag football. But it's so different because there is no tackle, but the turnovers are just constantly, interceptions everywhere.
Yeah,
it's a much faster game. It's very exciting. So it's, but the thing is, what's cool is, although they're different sports, there are things that you can actually take and learn from each of them and apply them to the next.
There was the draft was last night for the NFL. It's continuing through today. And I forget who they were talking about. They mentioned a player who said his basketball experience in high school is what taught him how to get off a defender in football. So that is, pretty interesting. Okay. This is not the sports podcast.
Yeah. But you were also asking ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And, what's interesting on the ChatGPT, I would say it's less about the use of it right now for me. I'm trying to better understand about the AI, educating myself more. But also, what else? Because we always hear about ChatGPT. Well, what are the other solutions out there?
Mm-hmm.
How are they different? Why are they different? And just also just thinking about AI, because we're hearing so much about it. And, I was pondering the other day about it, it's just walking and I was listening to some news about AI, and it started making me think about there's the human element. And I started questioning, well, the one thing that's really unique about human beings is that we have feelings. You often talk about having that, I get that feeling in my gut or check, which is something that you've always done as an auditor, which makes you inquisitive.
Mm-hmm.
AI is not going to be able to provide that. It doesn't have feelings.
Yeah.
I don't know about the future, but that's something that I've been thinking about. And, so when people are kind of afraid about AI, but it's like humans still have to be very much part of the equation on that.
Yeah. And that's a good segue to what I wanted to talk to you about. So AI doesn't have feelings. It's probably not a great relationship builder, although it can help give you ideas or even write the email for you or something like that. So as a human, Scott, that you are, and needing to connect with other humans and especially stakeholders, like how can there's so much that they get pounded with, just emails, requests, all that kind of stuff. Like how could you break through for the CAEs that are listening might look at this and go, okay, this is how to maybe get the seat at the table or get the time with the executive that I need to, or stakeholder. How do you break through all that stuff and get engagement from stakeholders?
Yeah, I would say one thing that's very important, and this is tried and true, and I have done this since the beginning of time, is try to get a sense of who that stakeholder is. There were different ways you used to do it back in the day before, in social media, but, check out their LinkedIn profile, go see if they're on Instagram, et cetera. Find their interests. It doesn't take a long time, but get to know who is this person that I need to communicate with. Perhaps there are common interests in that. Yeah, you and I can now talk about certain things about soccer and our kids. You want to break the ice and have those conversations, but hey, maybe you don't have anything that's alike, but maybe there's something that they do that you're interested in. That hey, I've never done this before, but I'm interested in it. That's a great icebreaker. So I always feel as there's also too, is you may go talk to the people. Hey, how is this? What are your suggestions? You go connect with other people that know them. That might be something too, just depending on who that stakeholder is. But, one of the things I've always heard too is, hey, let's cut to the chase. Let's get right to business. And there's going to be folks like that. But the little chit chat is very important. And if you can start doing that, building up that relationship, and maybe it turns into something where you're not necessarily going to talk about the engagement or something. But if you can start breaking down those barriers, and maybe you guys meet up for lunch, maybe meet up for coffee, or whatever that might be, you're going to get to the point where they're going to be more open with you. And you can just get down to the real important things that matter to them, that matter to their team, that matter to the organization. And, again, too, is there's the avenue. You might be able to expose them to other people and things within the organization that they may not be aware of, and vice versa. They may open doors for yourself or for your team, which is really beneficial. You and I were talking about something too, is we live in this stage. I know right now we're both virtual, we're different time zones, we're talking over, this medium right now. We're always just so used to that. And there's so many distractions. How many times have you been on a meeting where, someone's looking to this screen while they're talking because they're filling out an email or doing Slack, doing a web search or this or that. Try to break away. One thing you and I were talking about is, recently was I've been getting into doing walks with my daughter in the evening. And it's so great because you're not checking your phone. You're not in front of the TV or the monitors and this, that. You're actually outside and you're getting a sense of your surroundings, and it calms your mind. It helps with thinking and processing. That's why, I think a lot of people have always said, I do my best thinking when I'm in the shower. Well, It's probably because you don't have all these things in front of you. You don't have all these distractions. And I was mentioning to you is I would say one of the best suggestions I have is talk to your stakeholder and say, hey, why don't we both go on a walk? Even though you might be in different cities or whatever, put on your headphones, put your phone next to your ear, and both go for a walk at the same time and have that conversation then without the distractions, without the noise.
Yeah.
Something like that. Even if you're both at a coffee house separately, put the monitors away, put the screen away, and just have a talk.
And I think they would appreciate that.
Yes.
I try to do that every now and then, especially if it's someone that I've talked to enough, at least like through this medium, Zoom, Teams, whatever it is. I go like, all right, hey, we just got to have like a quick update call. Call my cell phone, or I'll call your cell phone. I'm just going to step outside. Like I love just, especially this time of year, just to be outside and be in the sun for a minute, or a few minutes. I really like that. To your point about the shower thoughts, we were talking about this earlier. I had to drive 3 hours, speak for an hour, and then drive 3 hours back. And those 3 hours there, not so much on the way back for some reason. Maybe it's just because it was afternoon, but the 3 hours there, I had to pull up my voice memo app on my phone because it was just like, there's a good idea. There's a good idea. There's a good idea. Because that's all I could do was think. And so I think there is definitely something to that, and the walks in general. And then you mentioned I'll call it the power of chit chat And I feel like if there's folks out there who aren't great at that, I would look into, the word I would use would be more like rapport and building, building rapport. And so I'm sure there's plenty of resources how to build rapport, introverts that are rapport builders or something like that. For those that maybe struggle with rapport building, I think that would be really good. And then you were talking about just notifications and things like that. This is very timely. I'm going to like gray screen my phone. Somebody turn that off. I Googled earlier. I don't know if you can see it, but it says how to turn email off.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, even with, if I have the tab closed, or whatever it is, whatever kind of controls that I set for myself, I wanted to know, is there a way to just say, even if I go into my email, it's going to be turned off and it only comes on for 20 minutes at a time, 3 or 4 times a day, so that there's nothing I can do. I can't get inundated with email unless it's during that 30 minutes or whatever. There wasn't a solution that I found immediately, so I got to dig into it. But I think that would be very, because so many times I'll just see, all right, I've got 3 emails unread right now. I'll see the 4th one, no matter what I'm doing. I go, well, let me just go check and see what that is real quick. So if anybody, I say that to say, if anybody has a solution, I am asking for someone to please send me a message on LinkedIn or something and let me know if you know how to turn emails off on Gmail.
I'll say this. When I was on the trip with my dad recently, he retired about 15 years ago. But one of the things he said is, the world is so different. For him, he remembers going on a business trip, and most people didn't have cell phones. So he'd come back, and there were a bunch of pink slips of people he had to call, and they were fine. You would call them or reach out to them when you got back. But people couldn't get a hold of you when you're on a plane or this or that. But when you got to where you need to be, you were able to actually communicate and have more. And he says, the funny part is you probably were more productive then than we are productive now.
Yeah, in the right way. I think that I read the other day some kind of quote that was, productivity is about not how fast you climb the mountain, but choosing the right mountain, basically. And so prioritizing and knowing where to spend your time. And I think that is kind of similar to what you're saying. So, all right. Well, over the past probably year and a half, one of the biggest risks for pretty much every organization has been hiring and retention, recruiting and all that kind of good stuff. And I know when you and I have talked about this in the past, you talked about recruiting talent versus character. So kind of like talk us through your perspective around that. And I'm sure people are listening like, okay, he's not going to say don't recruit character. So how could you, if for those that are like, okay, we're good with the talent, this is, I think, really applicable too, because the draft was last night and they always talk about that too. Do you get the best player? Do you get like the gym rat? You want the combination of both. So maybe the question would be, how can we tease out that character as well? Like, how can we understand someone's character during an interview process if we're looking to hire, for example?
Yeah. What sparked this too is a friend had shared a book that I should read, and I ended up reading it and recommend others. It's called Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. And it was, when I was listening and reading through this as well, he was talking about character, and then that's where it really made me start thinking about this in greater terms, especially folks that I've worked with and hired in the past on my teams. Is there's going to be, obviously, the way I look at this is, if I'm designing and constructing a rocket to go to outer space, I need to hire rocket scientists. I need certain skill sets and talents around that. If you don't, you're going to be quite unsuccessful.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like internal audit, and what I've always found is character is so important. And it's a matter of, that, you have someone that can quickly think on their feet. They're dynamic. They're willing to work with others. They can take criticism. They want to learn. And also, too, they can learn from failure. And they're okay to fail. And I think that's very important. If, there's often a lot of times, you might hire someone that's strictly just talent, that's so good, but there may be that ego with it. And they may not be able to share and play with others. So you do a lot with analytics, and we've talked about this too. And the fact is, I might need to hire someone that's really good in analytics and stuff, but are they willing to be okay with the fact of teaching others on the team how to do it, et cetera? But also too is, can you think critically? Anyone can start creating some analytics. You and I talked about, you do a quick pivot table when you created some type of analytic, but can you step back and think about it, maybe ask a few questions, but also have the right judgment to say, hey, I might be going down a rabbit hole. Let me bring someone else in and discuss it further. Yeah, it's very important. There's book smarts and there's street smarts. Okay. Some have both, some don't. But the thing about internal audit is that it's not black and white. It's very gray. And I'm not saying the gray is bad, but business is gray. And you and I talked about this previously, was there are folks that come from maybe an external audit that just look at, hey, because it is black and white, you have certain conditions, but they have a hard time transitioning to internal audit because they're like, yeah, but, where's the rule books? Well, sometimes you have to be more fluid than that. And so that's where I'm kind of speak about that. So one of the things about the hiring and interview process, I've been very successful working with some people who were not auditors, and they actually have great character. I could teach them they had skill sets and expertise from the character that was really important to be a good auditor. I could teach them the basics of auditing, and they were great at it because they asked the right questions. And there were scenes to the point where I was more seasoned, but I was learning from them, which was great. But when it comes to the interview process, we always kind of get to the point of asking these questions, just do they know how to do X, Y, Z? But are you asking some questions to understand who they are as an individual? And by doing that and getting to know them as a person, you're going to start understanding their characteristics. Yeah. One thing I've always asked myself as a question when I interview someone is, hey, if I'm going on a business trip with this person for 1 or 2 weeks, could I see myself going on a business trip with them? Not that we're going to go out to dinner and spend every moment together, but hey, can we go do our work? And, hey, if they're going to go back to the room, hey, that's cool. But hey, maybe we'll go to dinner as a team or this or that. But it's always something. And it's just something, if I feel like I just don't know if I could actually sit on a plane with them for 2 hours, that may just not be the right thing.
That's when I was in public accounting, I'd been there for 2 weeks in this position, knew nothing, had no idea what was going on. And we had just finished our 2 weeks of training, and I was back in the office, and the senior manager said, hey, we got this new candidate. We're going to go take them to lunch. We want you to come also. And I was like, for what? I don't even know how this thing works. What am I going to tell them? Hey, I did 2 weeks of training. I have no idea what's going on. And she said, no, just go for these 2 reasons and answer these 2 questions. Could you envision yourself working for this person one day? I went, okay, yeah, you can probably figure that out. And then she said, 2, would you want to have a beer with this person? And I went, okay, yeah, I could definitely tease that out and figure that out based on the conversation. So it's similar to yours in, would you want to go on a 2-week business trip with this person that you're interviewing? Ours was, would you have a beer with a person? And that always kind of stuck with me also, in terms of the person as opposed to the talent necessarily. So I think that's a great way to think about it. And 2 good questions, 3 questions, 4 questions, depending on which ones you want to use, to ask yourself during and after that process when you're considering people or vetting people. All right, so that's been a big issue. Hiring, retention, recruiting. That's been a big issue for a lot of folks. What else are you hearing from the CAEs that you talk to, you work with? What are they saying as we are struggling with this?
The interesting thing that I'm actually been hearing more of late is cost cutting. And because it has repercussion on everything else. And yeah, I was chatting with a friend of mine. He does M&A, and he was saying, almost 95%+ of the CFOs he's talking to are thinking about how can I cut costs, and usually that means people. So going to the fact of hiring people within your team, you may not be able to. So it's also how do you retain those people? But it's also, so this brings up something of the fact that, okay, if the company's cutting costs, there's a couple repercussions. One, that my own staff, am I going to be able to keep my staff? Because if I start losing people, that means I'm going to either have to pick up the slack amongst the rest of us, or that I'm going to have to forego some of the projects I'm working on. But on the flip side, you have to start thinking about, and what these CAEs I'm talking about are thinking about is, hey, what about my stakeholders, my control owners, my business owners? What's the impact there? Because if, someone key is removed from their team or that leader themselves, do others know the backfill? Is there a strategy? If, someone knows how to, process something within a system, and let's say it's a homegrown system, does anyone know what to do? And I'm not saying that it happens all the time, but sometimes we put the cart before the horse, and maybe someone gets let go before thinking through the repercussions. So if this is not on your radar, just step back and think about the fact is, hey, are there any key, processes or controls? Is there a backup plan for that? Because if there's not, that's going to become very detrimental. So that's where I'm kind of saying, so if you start thinking about the other risk out there, especially cyber is one of the biggest ones. Well, now that you're cutting people and there's technologies, you're opening an exposure for more cyber. So it has an impact on all the other major risk out there. And things are going on, but also to fraud. And because this is the other thing that's now happening, and I've heard this a few times, is company culture. I'm not seeing all organizations out there, but there's a lot of fragmented culture within a lot of companies, and people may be afraid to speak the truth about that, or et cetera. But that then starts, cutting things. Now you have greater fraud risk and exposure. So these are things that I'm starting to hear a little more, especially as there's uncertainty still within the economy. We have a big election coming up, which could turn the tide against, which way does our economy go? I think there's just so much uncertainty, and I'll tell you, when I was doing this 20 years ago, the way business worked and things were different a lot of ways, but it's become, we live in this world of Instagram, instant gratification. Our minds are changing constantly. So with all this, there's just a lot of things. But if you think about the costs being cut and people being cut, that's right in front of you. But then there's all those ripple effects. So just spend a moment. That cost cutting or loss of talent is not on your risk register, you may want to think about that.
Yeah, we've been recommending. Do I know? Go ahead.
I was just saying, be preemptive. Just start thinking about it, considering it.
Yeah, and we've been saying for since early 2023, especially where you can look at turnover rate within the given area you're going to audit. some people have even included that on their audit reports or what goes to the audit committee, and they'll go, hey, we went and looked at this area. Here's the turnover rate. Here's where we think the impact is because of that. And that's usually pretty easy to figure out how to do that. And so that's a good way to take a look at that also, is look at the turnover rate impact. If you have your control owners assigned to a control owner and all of a sudden it's blank, I mean, just doing an assessment of that, or, you know, how many years of experience does this person have that is now the control owner? And do we feel like they have maybe even the competency to be the control owner for that? And should they go through training? And obviously you'd only want to do it for key controls, like you mentioned, especially if it's a situation where there has been a lot of turnover. And now here comes audit to just add even more and go, hey, by the way, nobody, really owns this anymore. So take that on as well, in addition to all the other work that you now have to backfill from that. So I think we need to be a little sensitive to that also, right? Like,
yep,
provide guidance and support and assurance, but I wouldn't, depending on, and every situation is going to be different. I don't know if I would just do a blanket memo that says, hey, we're weak here, so make sure that, all this is accounted for, unless maybe it is a key control or is in support of a strategic objective.
Yeah. And, the only thing I would just see is, if you have a critical system or someone that's, heavily involved with processing of a control, it's good to understand is, do others know how to step into that role if they had to? Is there a backfill?
Yeah.
Simple question. And, if there's not, just quickly, what's the repercussion of that? Otherwise, you should be good, but it's something to consider.
I think that's a good way to put it. Absolutely. That's good. All right. Let's say you weren't in that scenario and you had all the resources in the world and they said, hey, Scott, come build us an internal audit department. What would that look like? You get to build one from scratch. What would that look like?
Let me start with the team. It's obviously you want to go and get the lay of land, but, eventually you're going to want a team. A couple things that I would do, step me back. I want a good solution, something that is flexible, that can be embraced by the organization. If I'm looking at, I want to bring in other stakeholders just to see how I would be using this solution, but also how it would benefit them. And what I mean by solution, if that's where I'm going to be conducting audits, maybe by chance, I or a second line will be doing controls management, internal controls, SOX, and also risk management, bringing some of those folks in, just so that you have a place to work, get out of the paper field. The other thing too, make sure that you have a sponsor, a champion amongst the leaders and executive teams. Yes, there's going to be reporting structures. You're going to direct report to the audit committee, dotted line to the CFO. I know we would like to have the CEO. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. That's a whole nother podcast. But the thing is, do you have a champion? Even if your dotted lines to the CFO, is there someone else on the executive team that, hey, I can use as a sounding board, a mentor, and, it's like any project you're going to be doing. Do you have that sponsor? The other thing is having an open line of communication with your audit committee is very important. You want to have that trust and feel within there. And, just make sure that everyone understands that it's okay for internal audit to have a voice and that it's, not a threat against anyone and that there's not going to be repercussions, but that you're sharing this to benefit and help the organization as a whole. Yes, I would say this is for any internal audit function, you're not always going to be right. And I always say this, one brain or two brains is better than one. So even if it's among your own auditee, but be able to spitball with other leaders within the organization, talk about things. One, they can help you, but you can help them, and just build that. the last thing, and this is where I kind of mentioned at the end, the team. A couple things is, if you don't, go find a third party and get them on a retainer if you ever need some people. Because if there's a big audit or some type of investigation, you need someone ASAP to bring in. If you have to go through all that cycle of getting contracts ready and this and that, that's going to be disastrous. Make sure you have that. For instance, if you had to, if it would be just like if your IT team doesn't have something with another firm from a cyber breach standpoint that they can go and call on a whim to bring in to help you investigate that. It's the same thing on the audit side. You have a major, investigation to do, and you don't have the people or the bandwidth, you want to have someone be able to call on hand. But as far as a team, I've thought about this a lot, and I talked about character and growing and developing. There was a TV show a long time ago called Leverage. If you never watch it, it's a great TV show. But the thing that I really liked about this was you had this cast of characters. One person was, the strategist who was the leader, almost like your CAE. And there was someone who was really good building rapport and kind of getting information from people. Another one was the fighter. There was a hacker, and I think there was like the security person. But over time, these people had the right characters within them, although they had certain skill sets that they actually taught, learned, and developed from each other, and they grew as a team, which made them stronger and better. But everyone that they came in contact with, they made better. And I think that's really important amongst your team is, yes, there's play to everyone's strength, but also if you have that right character and such, they can help everyone. And, I don't want to call it a weakness, but how can you get better at your own strength to help them and vice versa? So that's how I would build and evolve my team.
Yeah, there was we did a strength finders. For those that aren't familiar, there's a free way to do it, and it takes, I don't know, maybe 25 minutes. I think the point is to answer the questions really quick, and so it shouldn't take that long. And I know I did it with a whole group of 30 plus auditors one time, and I just kind of sat there and said, hey, everybody go do this. Here's the link. And I was like, it'd take about 25 minutes. And at the 25-minute mark, I was like, all right, how's everybody? And the person was like, I still got 25 questions left. And I went, okay, I'm pretty sure we already know where you're going to fall in the strength finder. Like, decision making isn't going to be your thing. That's not going to be one of your top 5 strengths. It was when I was at in public accounting, and so we all took it. Everybody at the IT audit group, and I thought it would be interesting to take the collection and go like, hey, what if we built our teams based on our top 3 strengths, so that we're not all the same type of person on the team, to get diversity, kind of like you were talking about. Turns out, of all of us, like analytical, have you ever taken strength finders before?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like analytical was number one we had the most analyticals, like that was our number one thing. And then as a number one, and then top 3, it was like 95% of us had analytical. And we all went, we're IT auditors and public accounting, of course, that's going to be ours. And so I went, that's probably not that great of an idea for this group. We're too similar. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, and I like the idea.
Well, one of the things that's I feel that's important is if you have a team member that's analytical, that knows how to do analytics, as I mentioned this, can they teach and develop others within the team to utilize those tools? Whereas you may have someone that's really good at understanding operations and dissecting it, and then someone who is an IT auditor, have them work with each other to really be, and I've always said this is, when I think of audit, I think of an infinity sign, because it used to be the old thing of financial, operational IT. Well, it's all interconnected, and that's where the infinity sign comes in. And to be able to take everyone and build within that, if we could all build our skill sets and with our character and have that all work together, we really could flow much better and provide better within the team, but within the organization.
I think there has been some solid practical advice, especially around the areas of like risk right now for a lot of folks, and where you can actually help. So for those that have been listening, I feel like there's a handful of notes that people have taken and gone, yep, that's good. I need to go do that. Yep, that's good. Oh, that's a good resource. I need to go do that. But with that said, is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, for myself, it's the reason you and I have connected. It's I want, and I'm passionate about helping others. And a lot of people tell me this, Scott, that's sweet. I've always loved mentoring people and so forth. So, after 20 years of being a practitioner, a CIE, doing audit, SOX compliance, risk management, I was then spent 5 years at Audit Board and in helping, advising organizations on leveraging that technology. But it's what really inspired me, and part of this is my dad, and I'll talk about him every minute I can. But he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer from stomach cancer that spread, but he is a very positive person, and he's planned. He's always planned, and he's with the diagnosis, it came out of left field, but he's, rather than freaking out about it, he's like, okay, I've already planned for every type of scenario, and now this is just a hurdle, and I've got to attack it head on. And it's having gone through this with him, and he's done so far about 65 weeks of heavy chemo. You wouldn't know. The man, he rides his bicycle to go to get treatment. And we've gone on trips together, and he's walking 13 to 20,000 steps a day. He just keeps going and enjoying every minute of life. But it's really inspired me to start my own organization, which is why I founded ARC Hybrid. ARC being audit risk and compliance, and it's where I want to empower the professionals who do this every day, who have their living in the trenches, to have their voice heard and really share. We can talk about things at times, but I want to hear from them. And, there's a lot of things I'm doing behind the scenes to get ready for this and to help them. But, in the meantime, if there are those out there who are seniors, managers, directors, CAEs, and, I'd love to connect, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or go to www.thearchhybrid.com and let's connect. I want to hear what you have to say. And if there's a way that I can share your voice, I want to do that. But the final closing thought on this is something my dad's always said to me. He said to me a long time ago, and I've recently shared this with some friends, was, you're going to come across a door. It's going to be an unmarked door. Don't be afraid to open it. You never know what's going to be on the other side. Yes, it could be very frightening, but something you can learn from, but it also can be absolutely amazing. And I've had the opportunity to walk through many unmarked doors with my dad and with others or by myself, and the experiences we've had are amazing and life-growing. So that's what I want to leave folks with doing. And you know what? Family's number one prayer.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.